so much, Fred and Olivia, and everybody for being here. Appreciate the opportunity to come before you today. And what Fred was speaking of is exactly what I was planning to talk about. My work to duplicate what Reverend Burgess and Councilman Lavelle did at the city level of making racism a public health crisis on the county level. That was done times running together now, so I think it was in March. But so what that looks like is that's a very foundation of doing the equity and racism work that we need to do in this region. And so this tomorrow, tomorrow we will be introducing a motion to start that work and building that table, that city and county table of collaboration to do the equity task force. So the motion that will be coming forth tomorrow is just basically saying that the county will work with the city and have a place on the city's task force to start the racism and equity work that needs to be done in the region, which will eventually be expanded to the county. But we are starting with the city because, of course, the city has been on the forefront or has been a little bit more ahead in doing the work. So we thought that would be a great way to start the partnership and coalition that is desired for this region. So how this, I would say, for nonprofits, how nonprofits can get involved, and let me back up a little. I understand that folks like to see policy change, and of course policy change is very important, but you can't legislate individual attitudes. You can't legislate people to not hate. I mean, you maybe be able to punish those things, but you really can't legislate personal attitudes, ideologies, and behavior. So for that, individual accountability and responsibility is what's needed. So what that looks like in the nonprofit for is rising up Black leaders, partnering with Black organizations. I know a lot of nonprofits outsource for some of their services, such as maybe accounting or policy work or things like that. So when you're doing those things, seek out an organization that is Black led or that is doing the work, or a Black person who is doing the work. Like I know there is an accounting company that is run by Francine Cameron, who is a Black woman who could easily service nonprofits who need accounting services. So being mindful of who you're hiring, who you're partnering with, leveraging your position or your organization to bring along and help lift up Black voices, and being intentional about that. So also nonprofits are in a very good position to, because you're outside of you kind of run your own thing there. You do have the power to kind of more address systemic racism and being intentional about that, and not and really doing your own self checks. What we've seen is a lot of times Black leadership or someone Black has come up with an idea, doing the work, and then all of a sudden a white organization comes in and gets the funding and kind of co-ops that work and hijacks it and runs with it. So that stuff is harmful to the Black community and Black people to which you're supposed to be advocating or claim to be in alliance with. So those are things that definitely need to be addressed. Nonprofits could do things like adopting the Rooney Rule. So when you do have an opportunity or a role that comes up, to use that opportunity to hire or at least interview a candidate of a Black candidate, a diverse candidate, a candidate of color, or all of the above. Like one thing that I would say that I did not like about the Rooney Rule is it kind of gave the tokenization of, having one person come on to be interviewed. So like, let's take the Rooney Rule and kind of remix it and make sure that there's just not one person, but you're actually looking for talented people and being intentional about bringing on diverse partners. So And then another thing that nonprofits could do is leverage their positions, build coalitions to come against other entities that claim to be nonprofits, such as UPMC, and getting them to lose their nonprofit status. So there are ways that nonprofits can work together to advocate and really stand for the lives, Black lives. And those were just some of the ideas that I had around that. I do work with nonprofits around policy, one of which is the Justice Collaborative, who is really a nonprofit who works around policy. They have lawyers, they have a whole team on really working on issues to go against dehumanization in whatever form that is, whether that's healthcare, criminal justice, police, whatever form that is. They are doing the work to try to eliminate that. So that is another avenue that nonprofits can take, and partnering, either if you're not 501, if you're not a 501, 504, then you may not be able to do some of that work, but you can partner with a 504, and there's a lot of Black organizations that do have the 504 status. So that would be a way that you can make sure that you're really drilling down into making sure that there's substantive policy changes that are really hitting at the core of what we need to see in this region. And right now, that looks like police. A lot of that is around policing right now. So that's a lot of the work that outside of the racism work that I'm doing is policing work at the moment. So defunding police, demilitarization of police, the union. So if you have a nonprofit that has relationship with unions, then that would be a way that you can help when we're trying to get transparency around union contracts that are being that are agreed upon with police and the city. So there are a number of ways that anybody can get involved, and anybody can really do the drill down work to stand with Black lives and to do the equity work within this region. So I'm gonna shoot it to Ed so that Ed could talk about some state stuff, and then we can come back and chat together. Ed? Okay, I see him here, but I don't see him here.
It looks like Ed might be on mute.
Yeah, I just sent a request to him to unmute.
There we go.
And you may.
Well,
Hello.
I did.
Cool.
Good morning.
Oh, there he is.
Hello?
All right.
Hello.
Yep.
Good morning, everybody. How you doing? I was on mute. I'm sorry. First, thank you for allowing me to be on this call. I appreciate it. I think there's a couple things. One is I was never for reopening the state. I thought that was the wrong narrative, because I don't believe that we'll ever do business like we did before the COVID-19 virus. So just to talk about that we're going to reopen the economy was wrong. I believe that we have to rebuild the economy like we have to do every 50 or 60 years anyway. And in rebuilding the economy, I think that we have to look at how we deliver services from the state differently. For instance, we know right now that when we discuss education, we have to make sure that each one of our kids, whether it's working through nonprofits or whether it's a direct allocation from the state, each one of our children in the public school system has to have a laptop. They have to have internet access, because we don't know if we're going to see the COVID virus in the fall or not. But what we have to do is be prepared to deal with it. So part of the line item, we already know that we have a hole in the budget, and we did a partial budget, and we'll finish up the other budget in November. But the reality is we can appropriate money to old line items that we know will no longer exist, or we can look to rebuild our economy by making sure that we're appropriating funding in areas that we know we're going to need going forward. Either or, both of them are needed in order to deal with the deficit that the state has. It's just about how do we invest our resources. So for me, it's not about investing resources like we did last year. I don't think that no organization, nonprofit, corporation, or business should be talking about how we reappropriate money that we know will never no longer exist just due to the fact that we have a new economy. So we have to think outside the box. Even when we talk about healthcare, the fact that we didn't have enough protection equipment, that should never be. We have to invest more money as we close this gap to ensure that we have enough funding to be able to make sure that we have the proper equipment. The catch is, how do we get there? We have to take money out of public safety. We have to talk about, we invest so much money in public safety, and it is yet to give us a good environment. You can't invest a lot of money in public safety and think you're going to have a great public health system. We need to invest more money in public health, because in creating a better public health environment, we will get a better public safety environment. So I think that we have to think about how do we take some of the appropriations out of public safety, whether that's police or incarceration, and put it in public health so that our people are healthy and we have the type of protection that keeps our people healthy. I think we have to think about how, again, we have a deficit. We got to fill the budget, but we can't fill the budget with yesterday's line items. We have to look and see, where's this money, where are we going to get the best return for our investment with this money? So that's key. Police community relations. We got 19 bills, 19 police community relation bills. None of these bills have been called up in the last 4 years. We have never had a police reform bill called up. It is time that we give the Republicans all 19 bills that's out there and ask them, which ones will you support? We know the day that we live in it. Everybody's seen the video that happened in Minneapolis. Everybody's seen the video of all these deaths with police in the Black community. It's time that we have real police reform. We can't continue to ask the police to come to the table and they say they want change, but they never grab the olive branch and help us institute change. If we're going to have confidence in our police, in our policing, in our law enforcement, in our criminal justice system, we have to have the type of reforms that give people their life back. And if we're going to supply them with 19 bills, 19, and they come back and say that we can't support none of these bills, then what are we waiting on? Do we think it's going to get better? We already know that every time it gets worse and worse, as elected officials called up here to do what's best by the people, it is time for my Republican colleagues to talk about what police reform bills they can support. You can't keep saying you don't want to support public reform bills, but you want a better society with police and community. It is time for them to step up, or it's not going to get no better. It's only going to get worse. And why would we want a worse society when we have an opportunity to make it better? We can do this, but it's not seeing people. It's not seeing color, it's seeing people. It's seeing a humanitarian issue that we need to address. Racism. We know racism exists. We already know racism exists. But here's how I always tell people, if you run a nonprofit, if you run a corporation, how I know that you're really willing to help out to eliminate racism. If I walk in your executive team and I see nobody that looks like me, and you tell me you believe in diversity, I have to ask you, should I believe in what you tell me, or should my eyes look and see what they see and determine that it's a sexy conversation for you, but you have to take an appropriate action to ensure that your executive team has the level of diversity that it needs in order to make decisions that are good for everybody. So one of the ways that you can help eliminate racism is look at your executive team. How many African Americans do you have on your executive team? And if you look around and you have none, or you just have one, ask yourself, are you living up to the creed of ensuring that we do all that we can to eliminate racism? We need a diverse executive team because diversity is the spice of life. It gives us an opportunity to understand where everybody is coming from. And if we don't have it, then we're just doing status quo. And status quo don't grow. You got to be intent on having a diverse executive team. And if you're intent on having a diverse executive team, here's what you get. You'll get more contracts from minorities because you'll have a bigger net to be able to go out there and say, hey, who can do the accounting work? Hey, who can do the legal work? You'll have that there because you'll have a diverse team. So automatically the contracts expand. Your net in terms of how you service people, your service delivery plan, that changes. We're working together. And so those are the things that we have to work on going forward if we're going to eliminate racism, because it is economic. It is definitely economic. It's other things too, and I mentioned them, but economics is major. You don't know how many times I've walked into people's offices or they've come to see me and they have it's all white, no African American. And the first thing they'll tell me is that they serve an African American population. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, like, wow, you have no cultural competence and you serving my people. No cultural competence. We have to put an end to that. And that comes with all of us working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gainey, and thank you, Liv Bennett. I want to turn it over to Hannah to take some questions from the chat. And I also want to thank you both for joining us. Representative Inamorado couldn't join this morning, so I do thank the Western PA delegation for coming through and being able to answer these tough questions and have these tough conversations, as well as hearing from you, Liv, about the work that's happening at the county. So with that, I will turn it over to Hannah Locup on our team to kick us off with questions.
Thank you, Olivia, and thanks again to Liv and Representative Gainey for being here with us. I think covering the gamut of what you all really discussed today, I want to loop back to GPNP and the fact that GPNP is a network of nonprofits, many of whom members are here on this call, and really GPNP serves to advocate on behalf of the nonprofit sector and the communities we serve. And I want to ask too, with the fact that public policy and advocacy is a huge part of what GPNP does, how can our network work with elected officials such as yourselves and stay in the loop and updated with what you all are doing, support you all, and also gain your support in what we do as well?
For me, I'm always open to meet with anybody to talk about, and that's how I got connected with the Justice Collaborative. They reached out around another initiative that they were doing, and I started just connecting with them and started doing work around, because the work that we were doing, aligned. So and that's another thing is like, stop working in silos and actually come together and build a coalition that's doing the same work. So we're doing a lot of work around defunding, demilitarization, going after the FOP by snuffing them out through the unions. Just all this work that we see that needs to happen. And I think that for me, I can't speak for Representative Gainey, but I'm pretty sure that he's the same. Give us a phone call, tell us when you want to meet, and we're there. You got anything to add, Ed? He may be driving up to Harrisburg.
Hey, hello, there you go.
I was
on mute. Yeah, I was on mute, but I'll sit down with anybody. I believe that's the level of conversation we all have to have. Communication is important. Secondly, for me, I put out an email on what's going on in my district and throughout the city and at the state level every week. So anybody, if I have their emails, they get an email from me talking about what is going on from the state level all the way down to the local level. Thirdly is, you can always feel free to contact my office. We can sit down and talk about anything, particularly this budget situation, because I know each one of y'all have concerns with the budget. So anytime you want to talk about it, I'm more than willing to have a conversation with the budget. My social media is always giving out information weekly. I do a weekly update on my Facebook page to let people know exactly what is going on. Last week we took off. We will start again, but we're going to revamp it just to be more interactive. So there's a host of ways. All you got to do is give me a call. My number is 412-665-5501, or you can reach me by cell at 412-628-7170. But there's a lot going on. I always tell people, You know, there's a lot going on, and whatever your lane is that you want to be able to empower, that's the lane we should talk about, because that's where we're going to get the best bang for our buck and the benefit. So when anybody wants to talk again, my office number is 412-665-5501, and my cell phone is 412-628-7170.
I dropped mine in the chat.
Thanks so much to both of you for doing that. We really appreciate how direct the communication lines are, whether it's through phone or through social media. And that just, I think, just shows how connected you are with the people that you serve. And I also want to give a shout out to, since yourself, Liv, have been with GPNP and our Get Out the Vote sessions all throughout May. You're on each one of them. So thank you so much for doing that. And a thank you as well for Representative Gainey for being with GPNP last year during our state budget discussion. And now you're back here with us, still connected. And again, I think attests to how connected you are with the folks you serve. I want to go to the state budget, since Representative Gainey really lined it up so well. And you had mentioned some holes in the budget, and the fact that we are going to revisit the state budget and have to repass one in November. So what should nonprofits be looking out for coming down the pike? What should we understanding where the holes are before November comes?
So, you know, we're still, I mean, even though we did a budget, let me be quite honest, we're not 100% sure where the holes are at, because we don't know what's going to happen over the summer going into the November month. But here's what we do know. If I'm a nonprofit right now, like I said, I'm not thinking about how I reopen. I am thinking about how I rebuild my budget to be able to deal with future situations. So I'm thinking about what I need in the future, not what I needed yesterday. And I want my budget or my request to the state to reflect that. And I think that secondly, you have to have a strong advocacy right now. Like right now, I think that you should be, one, talking to the Allegheny County delegation in regards to some of the things that you're going to need. That's number one. Number two is that, you know, it would also help if you, even with my Republican colleagues, that you let them know, hey, here's some of the things that we need going forward. Because here's the reality. Nonprofits is going to play a major part, because we have to rebuild this economy. And some of the things that happened in the past can't happen no more. Like if you're in healthcare, you need a raise. Because right now with this COVID-19 virus, we can't have it to where you're not, where the labor is not stable, where the workforce is not stable. And so I think that every nonprofit that deals from the environment all the way up to healthcare has to talk about rebuilding their budget. What is it that they're going to need? Because if you base your budget on what you had last year, it's not going to work. I think you got to look futuristic and think about, what am I going to need in the future to ensure that I'm delivering the quality service that's going to help rebuild this economy again. I believe that's where you're going to find, even though we have a deficit, we still know that we have to appropriate money for health and human services, for the environment, for education. So the key is, if you're in those fields, what does your future look like? And what should you be asking for to help understand that this is where your budget is going now? The more you can streamline your budget, I think you'll have a lot of success at the state level.
Definitely appreciate the forward-looking vision and what it is that we need to keep in mind moving forward, and not returning to a past that was inequitable and unfair for so many of us here.
And that's why I think the time is now. That's why I think the time is now. Because even when my Republican colleagues used to balk at back then, they have to consider now. You have no choice. You have no choice. It's what the time calls for.
Absolutely. And I want to give our audience here, our participants here, a chance to weigh in. And so we have some poll questions lined up around what are some organizations' experience with advocacy. That's been a big part of our conversation today. So as those poll questions come up, I want to give you an opportunity to select your answers to those. And definitely folks can keep coming with their questions as well. And I also want to go into the chat and direct a question to either Liv or Representative Gainey, and there was a question around how can elected officials and lawmakers be more proactive instead of reactionary? We see a lot of reactionary responses right now. And so perhaps, Liv, you might want to weigh in on that.
Well, I think that you see reactionary stuff, not because there weren't people who tried to do more proactive things. It's just that you work in a body, a legislature body that doesn't see the urgency. So until it actually happens. So for, like Ed is saying, right now is the time. They have 19 bills. Why haven't these bills been pushed in the last 4 years? But now they feel the public pressure to do that. So it does seem very reactionary because unfortunately that is what a lot of our colleagues, that's how they operate. So for me, it's getting those folks out of office and getting other folks in that will be more visionary and forward thinking to push policy more proactively than being reactionary.
Change is hard. And a lot of people don't want to change because they have special interests that, you know what I mean, they're connected to. And so they try to keep the status quo line. And that's the problem right now. We're funding greed instead of funding things that we know make a difference in life. And until our priorities change, it's not that we don't have progressive or proactive ideas or legislation that's out there, but the Republicans, in my situation, the Republicans control the House. They decide what bills get called up. And you know, so they're not in a hurry to bring reform because they like the status quo. But here's what happened, and this is why I say the time is now. Their ability to pay homage to the status quo is why we're in the position we're in today. We need reform. That's why I said, forget reopening. We got to rebuild. Since they didn't understand the whole conversation of reform, now they're forced to understand the conversation of rebuilding. They have no choice. Because when you look at the budget, they know the line items that they have in this budget now. Yeah, right now, they just did one real quick so that we could get to November, they could kick it down the road. But the reality is that we're going to have to appropriate money in areas that they didn't want to appropriate before. And that's where the advocacy now comes in at. That's where we need you. We need you to talk about what it looks like, what we have to do, and why we have to do it. That's the inside-outside game of politics. While we know we got this moment in time, we got to utilize it. We have to tell them, listen, there's no way, and I know I'm going back to healthcare, but it's important because I believe we don't invest enough money in public health. There's no way that we can have the level of turnover in healthcare that we got right now and think that from a humanity standpoint, our people is going to be okay. And if we don't invest in front, then in the back end, we are going to have a balloon of a healthcare crisis like we've never seen before. And so now is the time to say, listen, you didn't want to reform, but you definitely got to rebuild your system. And that's what we need the advocacy of you guys from the outside to say the time is now for this level of change.
Yeah, I would say the same thing about the Police Review Board. That was introduced last year. And now, you know, now that we have this public pressure, we would likely be more successful in getting that through. But it wasn't that we didn't have the foresight and knowledge that we needed such a thing throughout the county. We just didn't have the people didn't have the political will to do it. So as Representative Gainey says, it's not that the ideas and the policy vision isn't there. It's just that we don't have, you know, unfortunately, we don't have enough people in office that push that through.
Yeah, thank you both so much for addressing those and those points. And there's a discussion going on in the chat around kind of the difference in funding and the call to reduce funding for police at various levels. And so there was a question that was around if there was funding that was reduced for police, where else should it go or would it go? Perhaps both of you can illuminate on that.
For me, I would send that to mental health or rehabilitation services. I had an idea, again, one of these things that I've already kind of talked around, but it hasn't gone anywhere, about changing the response to certain 911 calls to mental health professionals. So that right there helps to defund and take services from police to somewhere else. So if they're not responding to these calls, they don't need to get the funding for responding to these calls. So that's a real way that you can help start defunding police. So I would shift those monies to a community response team that looks like a mental health team that responds to mental health crisis calls, or possibly sending that money to rehabilitation, where, you know, a large part of our incarcerated folks are either addicted or mental health folks. So sending those resources over to actually address the root cause of what's causing these people to interact with the system in the first place. That would be my solution.
I think there's a lot of solutions, but one of the things that I think we have to do, because the time calls for it, is that we need to move the money to hazardous pay. We need to create a fund for hazardous pay. In Pittsburgh, we had a gentleman that worked environmental. He passed away. Nobody environmental public works that was out there dealing with this every single day. None of them was receiving hazardous pay. And so at some level, we need to remove some of that money from the police and put it into a hazardous pay fund, so that at the end of the day, people that's out there, the frontline workers that's out there, can receive hazardous pay, because they're working in extreme. I mean, you heard the story. Some of them couldn't even go home to their family, but yet they wasn't getting no hazardous pay. Some of them had to go to work and wear gloves from yesterday. There wasn't enough equipment and supplies. We got to look at the time. We know that regardless if it's the COVID-19 virus, or another virus, what we know is it's coming. And the key, since we know it's coming, is how do we prepare for it? Well, we know that the police budget is way too much. We need to take some of that money from the law enforcement budget, and begin to talk about putting it in a hazardous fund, not having to wait on Washington. We should have our own supply of equipment, so that when the next one happens, we're prepared. I don't blame nobody for not being prepared this time, because no one's seen COVID-19 coming. But now that we know it's here and we know another one is going to come, we have to that's what I mean about the time is now, talking about how we appropriate money going forward and not backward. And part of that is taking it out of law enforcement, creating a hazardous fund for those individuals that's on the front line, that is putting their life on the line. I'm talking about grocery clerks in the supermarket. Every day they dealing with 300 people, but they making sure we got food. We talking about nurses on the first line. There was no hazardous pay for any of them. We can do better than that.
Absolutely. And I think what you both touch on really reaches into another question that was put in our chat about what are some areas, maybe a top 3 from each of you, that you think are easier wins that our nonprofits can support with you all, whether in regards to the state budget or to county level action. What are some of those top 3?
Like policy issues or budget related?
I think either one.
So for me, if it's budget related on like reallocating resources, since that's kind of what we've been talking about, for me, it would be taking resources from law enforcement and reallocating those sources to education, taking it out of the incarceration system and putting that into mental health, and also putting money into workers. I mean, I think what Ed said is spot on, is like making sure that we're taking care of those who are taking care of us, and minimum wage workers who are now redefined as essential workers during the crisis. They weren't so essential when you're paying them $7 an hour, but all of a sudden they're really essential. You should pay them. You should pay them for such. So I would agree with that measure. All for it. So that would be my 3.
My 3-1 would be police reform. We need you. look, everybody has witnessed what's going on. And the fact that we have not had police reform at the state level in decades speaks volume to an inadequate system. And if we want to see a better society, then we really need your help in to push these bills that bring forth a better police-community relation. We need you on that. We don't need another African-American dying at the hands of the police because they ran into the wrong house, or that he was on the ground for 8 minutes and 46 seconds with a knee in his neck, with other police standing around, not even policing them. That's wrong. And there's stories after stories, countless stories. The first thing I ask all of y'all is to help us with that. Some of y'all live in Republican districts. Call your state rep or your state senator and say enough is enough. This is where we need y'all at. Secondly, we need to make sure that there's hazardous pay. There will be some bills introduced pretty soon that talks about hazardous pay. We have to have that. If we don't have hazardous pay for the next virus, then we have not done justice to the people that's out there putting their life on the line. That's the bottom line. And the third one is minimum wage. We need your help. I mean, like, when you see what these workers done, just to make sure that we're okay, and you want to pay them a minimum wage that is the lowest of all our surrounding states, but yet if you a state rep or state senator, you get a COLA, a cost of living adjustment every single year, and you can't, and then you want to say that you don't want to give them anything? I'm sorry, something is wrong with that. Them issues we got to fight for. If you want a fourth one, it's education. We got to make sure that our children are prepared to learn regardless of what the environment is. Regardless if we have another virus, whether it be COVID or another, our kids got to be willing to learn, and we have to provide the right equipment for them to learn. We can't fall back. We got to fall forward. And so those are some of the lessons that we learned through COVID-19. And the other one that is probably number one on my list, look at your executive team. Look at them. Are they reflective of the constituency you serve? If not, diversify your team. That's how we get to a better society. So those are the things that I feel is important.
Thank you, Representative Gainey and Liv. I apologize, my allergies are happening today, but I think both of you really were wonderful, and people have been shouting out the wisdom that's been shared today. And I think the connection that both of you illustrated was between, if we improve public health, we improve public safety, and those happen together. Those are linked with also the improvement of education and the increasing engagement of our community. And so I want to wrap up questions close to 10:50, which I know that we're at, but I think a final question for both of you is, what are some of the things that we can look forward to regarding public schools and the potential of reopening this fall, as well as what are some kinds of lessons or things that we should look out for regarding voting this fall as well?
So I'll do the voting one. I think we are really at the place where we're trying to kind of debrief what happened during the primary, try to find what we did well, what didn't work so well, and make sure that those things are cleaned up for the general. This is obviously a huge election year in the general. So we do not want to be a state with our behind out because we didn't have our stuff together, or at least a county. So I think some of those things that we learned, or that we did well, I'll say that we did well, is that we counted our mail-in ballots before we counted our in-person ballots. So we were ahead of the curve in that way. Where Philly waited until after they counted their in-person ballots to count their mail-in ones, so that put them behind. So I think we did that well. I think we did mailing applications to everybody that was registered to vote with a returned prepaid stamped envelope. I think that was also another thing that we did well. A lot of other counties did not do that. Some things that we probably could have done better. Of course, you know, the reduction of polling locations was a huge thing that was not favorable, especially if we were trying to keep people apart for COVID, and we were actually condensing folks together. So that might be something that we want to look at come November, if we can get back up to a higher number of polling locations so that we don't have so many people coming together. We had, I know in Ed's district, there was over an hour wait at Fulton just to vote. So
Yep.
that is not what we want to see in making sure that we give people the opportunity to vote. That looks more like disenfranchisement than enfranchisement. So again, we are, Hannah, as you know, we are in conversations, Participate PA, which with Hannah was part of that. We're still conversing on different ways of how we can work into education for the general, and kind of going back and finding out the good, the bad, the ugly on voting, so that we can make sure that those things are addressed when it comes time for November. I don't have as much control over schools. County doesn't control schools, so I could just give you my personal opinion there. Which my personal opinion is coming back into September. I think, I mean, we've heard that there was supposed to be another spike in August. So none of us are clairvoyant. We don't know what the future holds. But if that August spike happens, then obviously, and it looks anything like it did what we just came through, we of course will not be wanting to put people back into classrooms come September. So I think a lot of this kind of has to be in a waiting pattern just to see what happens going forward in August. But to that point, I think we still should be working towards making sure that we have one-to-one student to technology or device ratio in case we are not able to come into the classroom. As Ed said, we didn't have this, we didn't know what COVID was going to be, but we do know now. So like, now that you know better, let's do better. So if we need to take the summer to make sure that we're getting technology and devices and students connected to Wi-Fi and whatever have you, to make sure that they're able to come into the next school year successful, I think that's what we need to do. And yes, we should, make some plans for the classroom, but I don't think that's where the priority is. Again, if we are listening to our health experts, they have already said a while ago that there's probably going to be another spike in August. So I don't know if the classroom is the best decision come September.
Yeah, I think one, let me start with voting. I'm concerned about the November election. I really am. And the reason why I'm concerned about the November election is that I think that, and I
question is,
hello?
You say the health FA.
Hello? Somebody on? Hello?
Hi,
Hello?
sorry about that, Ed. I think we did have an interruption briefly, but please continue your thought.
Okay. I'm concerned about the November election. One, and I introduced the bill, and the bill says that instead of doing the mail-in ballot application, just send every registered voter a ballot. And the reason why I'm concerned about it is twofold. One, I think that, like, the data at the state capitol, there's supposed to be a protest from gun owners and others in regards to what's going on. So that's number one. And I think that when you get closer to the election, if they have an idea that Donald Trump is going to lose come October, I don't think in the urban area, but I can definitely say some areas of Penn Hills, Monroeville, Plum, if you think open carry was a problem with them showing up to the state capitol, stating what they need, please believe they're going to be at the polls. They're going to be at the polls trying to intimidate people because their choice is looking like he's going to lose. We know that. We already know they're going to show up. Hey, they showed up 4 years ago. How much more have they been empowered now to show up? Particularly in this time of COVID-19. And we already know the economy is not on hold. So at the end of the day, we know that there's going to be some intimidation in the polls. We also don't know about COVID-19. We don't want to put our people in situations where they can contact the disease. So for that matter, it seems to me that we should just be doing, instead of doing a mail-in ballot application, what's wrong with just sending every registered voter a ballot? Let them fill it out and send it in. That'll eliminate a lot of the intimidation and everything else that we got to deal with. It eliminates it. That's number one. Number two, in regards to the schools, I think you have to prepare for both. I don't think that you can prepare just as we're going to open school as normal, because even in that, we're not. So even if you open schools, how are you going to practice social distancing? So that's a situation that they need to talk about now, so that when September comes, they're prepared. You got to talk about social distancing now. What does that look like? You know what I mean? How do we get it? That has to happen right now. And secondly, we have to have another strategy in case we can't go in the classroom. And we got to do virtual learning. There's already models out there because people are doing virtual classroom learning already. So it's not like we don't have nothing to go on. The conversation has to be, are we prepared to ensure that we can do it with every child? So laptops, internet, more peer teachers, provide more instruction. Everything is on the table now. And so going forward in education, there should be two strategies going into the fall. And for elections, yes, I'm concerned about intimidation because some of these guys, some of them out here, it's sad when you see it the way you see it. It's a problem. So I'm saying to everybody, those are the things we got to look out for.
I thank you, Ed, for pushing that, sending a ballot directly to voters at the state level, because that is why we only were able to send applications, because it's unlawful for us to send a ballot without the application. So I appreciate you doing that at the state level to help us at the county level.
Yeah, we'll see. They got to push it. Again, here we go. The Republicans got to pull it up. And now we know the Republicans, they've already told me, listen, well, Trump's done already told them, which has got back to me, that they don't want to even do the mail-in ballot applications no more. They want everybody to show up to the polls because they know that most people are not going to the polls because of COVID-19. So that would help the Republican Party. But what I'm saying is it doesn't help democracy. Democracy is ensuring that everybody has a ballot.
Yeah, we know the Republican Party does not help democracy. They are for disenfranchisement. So again, thank you for that, because we really do need that to happen for us to be able to really send a ballot to every single person and skip. Heck, that would save us money. If we don't have to do 2 mailers, then that's saving the county money.
Yeah,